folks, hope you're well. Just a quick, hopefully, little market update tonight focused on the DXY, just because I've been speaking to a few folks about this today and it made more sense to do a quick wee video than post a long Discord post. So the discussion itself that we're having today comes from some tracking that I've been doing on DXY since before the tweet that I'll put on screen on October the 12th, which basically highlighted my thinking at the time. This will offer a little bit of insight into the multi-time frame structure video that is next up in that series, but essentially, and I'll show this in a chart in a second, the weekly and daily charts are bullish, and the H4 had turned bearish into a daily point of interest. It then broke back into bullish structure itself. The H1 broke bearish after the H4 impulsed through its own high, creating a new H4 trading range. And that's what framed this narrative for me in terms of the pullback from here into a lower H4 point of interest before potential continuation forward. So in terms of how I look at that, if the higher time frame is bullish and that time frame -1 is bearish, then I see that as a retrace on the higher time frame. As I said in the structure video, the higher time frame always takes precedent. So for example, if the daily is bullish and then the H4 turns from bullish structure to bearish structure after the daily hits a point of interest and creates a high, then that to me is a retrace of the daily. The H4 is telling us there that the daily is retracing. So I'm then looking on the daily chart for any points of interest that the daily would generally bounce from, and I'm tracking the H4 into those areas to see if it then breaks bullish again from that area. So if the H4 structure breaks bullish again back into confluence with the daily from inside a daily point of interest where we would reasonably expect a daily retrace to go to, then I'm looking for continuation towards the daily high at that point, the daily range high. So that tweet, or this tweet, was on the back of that analysis, and that's what I've been tracking since that point. Initially, price did run down into the H4 point of interest that I'd highlighted there, but only just. It just kind of tickled it and ran away. So I put out an update, which again I'll put on screen just to say I'd like to have seen it dig a little bit deeper. And I explained this a little bit more in the Discord than in the tweet. But the H1 did flip bullish and was starting to run away again towards the high. So again, in terms of the structure and how I look at it, I essentially use structural pairs. There's a high time frame and a high time frame -1. High time frame sets takes precedent, and the high time frame -1, the structure in there tells us where the high time frame is going. So for me, that's the monthly paired with the weekly paired with the daily paired with H4, the H4 paired with H1, and the H1 paired with M15. And that's how I work up and down through the time frames for multi-time frame structural analysis. It works for all different types of trading. I'm not going to go into that here because that's for the multi-time frame video, but it's just taking a frame where we are with this. So at this point, my bias was still that DXY is in bullish structure, and I'm anticipating a run to the H4 high and the daily high into the kind of 117 to 120 range. And simply for me, because no structure's broken yet on any of these time frames in terms of the way that we look at it. So let's jump into the chart, and I'll try and explain that a bit better on the actual chart live. So let's start on the daily, so I can show the daily structure and where the starting point for my analysis was in that. So if I flip on my daily structure tracking and the daily range, you can see here daily is quite clearly in a bullish structure. It's bullish order flow there, higher highs, higher lows, higher highs and higher lows. The daily range here, current daily trading range, we can see it came back into what we would consider a reasonable point of interest, and that is that H4 low that I was talking about, and then ran away. It has put in a failure swing high at the moment, so that's a sign we could look at for reversal. But in terms of the daily itself, it's come back to where we would expect, but nothing's broken in terms of the range. So the range is still intact, and we're around about equilibrium of it at the moment. So that range is between 107.68 and 114.77 essentially. If we drop a bit lower into H4 and switch that structure on. I'll switch on the range. You can see this is the current H4, the H4 trading range, and I'll stick on the path just to kind of show the structure and relate it back to that schematic drawing we did in the video the other day. So we can see here at the top, so daily, remember daily's bullish at this point, so within this up here, the daily's bullish, and then H4 comes to the top, puts in a new high, breaks the low, failure swing, breaks the low. So that was what we spoke about the other day in terms of that 3-point reversal where the H4 flips bullish but the daily is still bearish. So this then signifies to me that the H4 or the daily is in a retrace and the H4 is performing that retrace. We see then here that the H4 breaks the previous high, creating the new trading range that it's in, and that's the first sign that the H4 is returning to bullish posture, which would signify to us that we potentially go back to the daily posture of bullish, and we're targeting the daily range high, which is up here. So the H4 high there is the daily high. Again, as you can see at the moment, the H4 has failed to break out of its range high. It had this little kind of peak up here, and if I put on the points of interest, you'll see it came back in. This was the initial point of interest that I'd mentioned in that first tweet when price was here. So it came back in and just kind of tickled it and then ran away to the high. As I mentioned in the other video, I don't consider a high break unless we see a candle body close. So here on the H4 we can see that it just ran above it and wicked above it. So it's essentially set an H1 high. That is an H1 high now because it was a candle body close. But the H4 high remains here for this moment in time. It's come back down into the range, came back and dug into this point of interest again, so essentially closed this imbalance. This here is a breaker. As soon as this does high, low, higher high and then breaks it, this candle here becomes a breaker. We can see it run back into the breaker and then broke through this area again into the lower point of interest, the lower fair value gap that I had mentioned on a subsequent tweet and again within the Discord. So at the moment the H4 is low in its structure. It's in a deep discount as we would consider, but it's still within structure. Nothing in there has broken. So at this point it's difficult for me anyway to call a Dixie top. I think the H4 range is the key range at the moment. What we're looking for is, does it bounce here off of this point of interest, having closed this gap, and run the high again and take us back into the higher end of the daily range where we're looking for daily range high to be taken, or does the H4 break the H4 low here, put us back into neutral and get us back into that daily range, which I'll switch on just to show you what it is, bring us back into this daily range where we're then looking at daily range low down here. And if that was to then fall, then we could start talking about potentially the top being in for Dixie. I'm going to show you the weekly ranges as well, just so you can see how this all ties together. So this is the current weekly trading range. I'll jump to the weekly chart and we'll stick on the weekly structure. Sorry, my Discord is sending lots of messages and they're in the bottom corner of the screen. So here we go. So that's the weekly structure. So again, you can see the weekly structure is very much bullish in line with the daily. The weekly range is the same as the daily range, just incidentally. We can see here that the weekly itself, because it's the same range as the daily and they're all kind of fractal, it has come back into a discount of its own range. It's got below the equilibrium. It's filled this gap that it created here and bounced off what would have been a previous weekly range high there. And that's where it's sitting at the moment, is that previous weekly range high. As I mentioned in that video, range highs and lows, or previous range highs and lows, can be key points of interest as well. So we'll see what it does. But the weekly is essentially sat at equilibrium. So we've got H4 still within range, nothing broken, bullish posture. Daily still in range, nothing broken. Looks like it's completed its retrace based on the H4 returning to bullish posture. The weekly still bullish posture, sitting at equilibrium with the range, nothing broken. So everything to me here still suggests bullish continuation for Dixie. But I had a bit of a deeper dig into into the monthly structure. It's not one that I usually go into too much detail on, but when I saw so many people calling top on DXY, I thought it's worth having a look to see if there's anything there that would give us a bit of hopium in terms of the high being in. So if I switch on the monthly structure and scan it a bit, so this is the most recent kind of moves on the monthly, and you can see here the previous trading range from here to here. I've got that range actually on there. I do. Nope, put that one off. So the previous range was here to here. As we can see, this is an impulsive move out of that range, and with such a strong impulsive move, and that is a really strong impulsive move in the monthly. That's a parabola if ever I've seen one. You would expect, if this is going to be a top here, that you would see some sort of reasonable retrace back into the range at a minimum. I would say to the top of this trading range. Again, talking again about previous trading ranges, but ideally somewhere a bit lower. So if we assume that this might be a local top, if it's not the top but a local top on the monthly, and have a look at the trading range, equilibrium would be down kind of here, so around about your $100 mark for DXY, which is also right where this fair value gap is, which is interesting in terms of a point of interest in that chart. So we've got essentially two clear points of interest on that monthly chart. There's the 103.87 level with the previous trading range, and the fair value gap starting at 101.31, running down to what does it run down to? 99.24. That one there being below equilibrium would be the one that I would favour, but because this has been such a bullish chart, it might have a shallow retrace. But the general kind of thought here in terms of DXY is, if we have seen the top on it, we would expect to see retraces into those kind of areas, but we would need to see the H4 structure break first. That would be the first clue. Then the daily structure break, and then at that point, because daily and weekly are the same range, we would be seeing the weekly range break as well. We would have a reasonable idea that it's going to pull back a bit further, and that would be good for risk assets. And just as a kind of final point on this, when we're looking for, could this be a top? Looking back to the point I made earlier about paired time frames and looking at the higher time frame. So this being a monthly, I had a look at monthly and quarterly points of interest. So we have here a 3 month or a quarterly and a monthly imbalance on these charts within that previous structure to the left, and that's where prices run into. So it very well could be a reasonable area that you would expect some sort of reaction and some sort of retrace back into the range from a monthly perspective. So yeah, just to sum up, in short, I don't see with my process anyway that the DXY top is confirmed yet, because I've not seen any structure breaks from H4 up that would suggest that's the case. H4, daily, weekly, monthly are all still in bullish posture. It could be in, absolutely could be in. I don't deal in indefinites, as I've said before. It's very much a probabilities and where that would be invalidated. So my bias at the moment remains bullish to the upside until we either see an H4 range low break, in which case I'm looking at the daily range and where it's going to go on that, or an H4 range high break, in which case the bullish confirmation has come, and I'm targeting the 117 to 120 area at the previous daily high. So yeah, top could be in, but for me the higher probability at the moment is that we see continuation until that's invalidated by range 4 low break. So hopefully that'll make sense, and hopefully there's not too much in there in terms of not having covered the multi-time frame structure yet. If anybody's got any questions, feel free to give me a shout. Until next time, stay safe. My tea's it. Gotta go.